Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to do a Friday Reads video where I catch up on the week in reading and talk about any bookish things that have gone on. The big thing that happened in the book world this week was, of course, the announcement of the Women's Prize for Nonfiction long list. I did a reaction. It will be linked down below. And I think there are only a couple of short things to talk about before we get into the actual Friday Reads. I will put a timestamp down below if you'd like to jump to the Friday Reads. And I figured we might as well cover some dates for book prizes because we have a lot of stuff coming up for that. We'll get the International Booker Prize long list on the 25th of February. We will be getting the Women's Prize for Fiction long list on March 4th. And the Carol Shields Prize will be announcing their long list on March 6th. So lots of fun, interesting stuff going on in the book prize world. I am really excited about all of it. And just a quick shout out to incredible book mail that I got just this morning from Layla Motley, The Girls Who Grew Big, a new novel that is coming out on June 24th. And I read Nightcrawling, and I'm dropping books. I shouldn't be trying to balance things in my lap, but I am. So I read Nightcrawling, which was Layla Motley's debut book, which was written when she was 17 and published when she was 19. And it was a very good book. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what she does next. And I'll talk more about this in my book haul for this month. But this is going to be published by Knopf. So thank you to Knopf for that. And let me grab this book that I dropped onto the floor. And the only other thing to cover before we get into the actual Friday Reads portion of the video is that you don't see Teddy with me today because he's in the kitchen with Joel. Joel is working magic in the kitchen right now. So he is glued to Joel's side. And it is actually Valentine's Day as I'm filming this, hence the sort of pink shirt and situation that you see going on. So Teddy is in the kitchen. You don't see Scout with me because Scout is actually not here right now. Scout is the foster dog that we've had for 3 weeks at this point. We may have found a home for him. So we will see how that goes. A neighbor of ours knew a woman who had a Welsh Terrier in the past and wanted to get one again. She currently has an Airedale and wanted a Welsh Terrier to go with. If you're unfamiliar, Airedales are the larger versions of a Welsh Terrier, which is what Teddy and Scout both are. So she has had dogs with anxiety problems, skin problems, so she might be perfectly matched for a lot of the stuff that Scout faces. So they are having a trial weekend with him, and we'll see how that goes. You know, I appreciate that a lot of people have commented saying that they think Scout should stay with us. I would just reiterate, we cannot do 2 dogs right now as much as we adore Scout. So I appreciate that you would like him to stay with us, but we just don't have the bandwidth, especially for a dog who has a level of need and attention like that. So, but we do adore Scout. He's a very sweet dog. So we're just hoping that we can find a good home. And Teddy was not happy. That's the other thing. Teddy was not happy having another dog in the house. And Scout was not too happy having Teddy around. You know, we could make anything work, but that is unpleasant. And we tried to make it work with Guinness and Jamie, and it was just years of 4 people trying to manage the relationships of the 2 dogs. And it was not fun. And we didn't want to do that to Teddy, and we don't want to do that to Scout. It wouldn't be fair to either of them. So we'll see how that goes. Teddy, so Scout went last night and we'll be staying with this person through the weekend, and we'll see how it goes. But Teddy immediately came back to life and was so happy to have his toys back out again. He has been chasing balls all day. So it's nice to see him bouncing back and feeling like he can inhabit his own space again. And yeah, so fingers crossed this will work out and that there will be a good home for Scout at the end of it, because that's all we really want. And we just know that this isn't the right situation. So anyway, let's get to the actual Friday Reads portion of this video. It was a quiet reading week. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Scout, especially in the evenings, had anxiety. Well, I don't even know if it's anxiety. We think it was he came from a place where he really got no activity. So it's possible that he would get overstimulated by actually being able to do things, and then would just kind of fixate on like trying to chew on his paw and wail. And it was just a lot to manage in the evenings. So I finished an audiobook, and that's the only thing, because sometimes if I was, sitting with him and like holding him to my chest to try to get him to calm down, I could listen to an audiobook, but I couldn't read. And work was also crazy again this week. So the physical book that I'm reading suffered, but I did manage to finish an audiobook. And if you remember, the audiobook that I had started when we last spoke in a Friday Reads video was Tartufo by Kira Jane Buxton. I have this advanced reader's copy that we got when we were at that trade show back in September and October. And I had been wanting to read it. It is now released. It was released in January. And I had been wanting to read it, but the thing that really boosted it up my to-read pile is that Joel listened to the audio and loved it. So we sort of did a swap. He read Four Squares by Bobby Finger, which I talked about in my last Friday Reads video, which will be linked down below. And I listened to this, and it was great fun. I mentioned last week that it's kind of like an Italian version of Fried Green Tomatoes. And I think that holds up because it's very, like, in the way that Fried Green Tomatoes is full of like Southern charm and Southern characters, and everything about it just kind of like screams Southern novel. Everything about this is really immersed in like Italian characters, Italian culture, and all of that. So, and it is set in a village. There's not any one protagonist so much as it's about the people of this tiny village. So it kind of holds up as the book went on. And basically, this is a town that has been facing something that is happening in some Italian villages. They are shrinking. The younger population, as they grow up, is leaving and moving to bigger cities for economic opportunities. And these towns are becoming economically depressed and underpopulated. And it becomes sort of a desperate situation. So this is a small village in Tuscany, and they are trying to figure out ways to bring tourism to the area. The mayor is the only person who knows how desperate their financial situation in the town is, because she recently became the mayor. Her competition was a donkey. And she got the role after her father had been the longtime mayor, her estranged father, I should say. And turns out he was mismanaging money for the town very badly. So a bad situation was made even worse. And in this situation, you have a man named Giovanni who has been hiding from the grief over losing his partner. This is a gay relationship, which was really great to see inserted into this book. So he's hiding from that grief by immersing himself in truffle hunting. And he and his dogs are out, and they find a giant truffle, like the largest truffle on record. And everything has to happen very quickly from there, because the thing about white truffles, or any truffle really, is that when you find it, you have roughly 5 days before it starts to go bad and lose value. So they have to quickly have an auction, figure out what they're going to do. And it stirs up a whole bunch of chaos in this small town. And I will say it gets a little bit too madcap at the end, I think. However, this is such a charming book. It's such a fun book that it really just asks that you sort of check your brain at the door and roll along with it. And I was very happy to do that. From a literary perspective, I think, it did just a little much, a little too many plot lines, a little too much going on, a little too much chaos in the back quarter of the book. But I just had so much fun with it that I could never begrudge it that. And, we could all use some charming, funny entertainment right now. So I would highly recommend Tartufo to you for that, because it was a really delightful engagement that distracted me from the rest of the world. And that is exactly what I needed. It's exactly what I wanted. And I'm thinking that there are other people out there who would probably benefit from something very similar. So I'm glad that I read this book. I listened to the audio, and the narrator does a lot of voices, and she does a very good job. And the text moves back and forth between English and Italian in the way of sort of like what I don't know what the Italian equivalent of Spanglish would be, but there are a lot of Italian words sprinkled in. So it's really nice to hear the narrator using them. And so whichever way you want to go, I do think the audio was a pretty delightful way to engage with this story. The print book that I have been reading is The Hills is Lonely by Lillian Beckwith. I had mentioned that I also had another library book, and I decided I really wanted to go with this one because I sat down and I picked this one up and I just really got engaged in the first chapter. However, I am 52 pages in, and I have been about 50 pages in since like Monday or Tuesday, and I haven't gotten any further. And again, that's a lot to do with the stuff that was going on in the house and taking care of Scout in the evenings and just being tired by the time I actually got into bed and not really reading a physical book. So that's why this one suffered so much. I had read a good chunk of it, I think, on Sunday last weekend, and I just really haven't had the time since. But that first 50 pages is really engrossing and engaging. So I think once I actually have time to pick this book up again, it's going to fly. So I have been referring to this as nonfiction, and then I noticed something really interesting when I picked up the book on Sunday, which is that the library where I got this book has this labeled as, I'm trying to hold this so you can see it without the glare. I think you can see it, fiction. So I was looking at that like, I thought this was nonfiction. And I looked on Bookshop. Bookshop.org has it labeled as nonfiction. By the way, this is not on Bookshop, and I don't think there's any audio of it. It is an older book. I think it was published in 1959, so there's no affiliate link for this one down below. But Bookshop, wherever I looked, it had it. Oh, Storygraph. Storygraph has it listed as nonfiction because it's not on Bookshop. So Storygraph had it listed as nonfiction. So I was a little confused. So I looked up Lillian Beckwith's Wikipedia page, and basically, she was living in England where she had, been born and raised, and a doctor recommended that she move to a smaller town in a different area so she could rest, relax, and, have some coastal air. And she got a letter that struck her as kind of funny and descriptive, so she ends up going to the Hebrides. And it turns out, like, that much is true. And a lot of the contents of it are true, but it's sort of a fictionalized version of a narrative. So the island she moves to in the book is not real. It is a stand-in for the island that she actually did move to. So, and you can almost tell because when she gets onto the island, there's a very comical situation where she can't get to the house where she's supposed to stay, and then she has to climb over a fence, and like the wind, I won't spoil anything, but like it's very comical. And I remember I did think to myself, I wonder if that really happened, because it seems too funny to be real. Although, funny things happen in real life all the time. So that is actually when I started wondering. And then when I saw the fiction on the side, so it is a memoir, but it's not entirely true. It's sort of liberties have been taken. Although apparently in later volumes, people from the village that she actually did move to complained that there were characters that were too close to real people on the island. So it makes it this sort of weird blurred line between fiction and nonfiction, but I am just having a really delightful time with this book, and I can't wait to actually pick it back up this weekend and see how far I get and finish it. And then once I do, the other library book that I have is Our Spoons Came from Woolworths by Barbara Comans. That will probably be my next physical book. I have not decided what my next audio is going to be. I'm sort of waffling back and forth between 3 options, so we will see which one ultimately comes out in the end, and it becomes the one that I listen to. The part of the thing is Joel's listening to an audiobook that sounds really interesting right now, so part of me wants to do that next, but he's not done. So I might have to find something in the meantime to carry me over until that one is available. So this is actually a very short Friday Reads video. There you go. So I've kind of covered everything, and we'll go from there. So keep your fingers crossed, please, that this turns out to be a good situation for Scout. It seemed like it was going well last night. We got some texts from the woman who had taken him for the weekend, and apparently he gets stressed in cars or overstimulated in cars, and he did really well in the car with her. When she introduced him to the Airedale, it went well, and then they were getting along, which is great because Scout and Teddy, it's not that they weren't getting along, but there was like quiet, subtle tension under the surface. So it sounded like they were getting along. So hopefully things have been going well again today, and hopefully they'll continue to go well over the weekend. I would love to hear what you've been reading, watching, all of that stuff in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time. Until next time, happy reading.